On to the hotline right now. Brett Dolan with us, Touchdown Radio, Arkansas Razorback Athletics. And are you on the call for USC UCLA on Saturday, Brett? Are you going to be doing that on Touchdown Radio?
I am. It's the beginning of what is my busiest week of the year, but also my most enjoyable. So looking forward to getting to the Rose Bowl on Saturday night.
All right, so detail the next few days, because you got a ton going on, don't you?
Well, it's got to stop sometime, so I think we're getting close to December. So, yeah, we've got the game of the Rose Bowl Saturday night. Sunday I go to Cancun. We have 2 games Tuesday, 2 games Wednesday on CBS Network in the evening. So Monday's all day in the gym rather than the beach. 2 games Tuesday, 2 games Wednesday. I'll sneak to Houston for a little bit of Thanksgiving Thursday. Then Friday I'll go to Portland. We'll have Oregon, Washington a week from Saturday. I take a red-eye out of Portland Saturday night back to Arkansas, concluding a 10-day roadie.
Okay, so first thing, because you've seen Texas each of the last 2 weeks, their win over Florida and the victory at Razorback Stadium. Do you take them seriously as a national championship contender after watching them closely these last 2 weeks?
Yes, but I think I put them in the same category I do 4 or 5 other teams. Are they worthy of being in that mix? Yes. Do they have flaws or faults? Of course they do. But in absence or without that true 1 or 2 elite teams that we've had in recent years with Georgia and Bama and so on and so forth, Michigan last year, I think they have every bit of a chance to win it. They don't run the football quite as well as they need to. But there's a reason why they're 1 and 2 in most categories defensively in the country. Total yards, interceptions, passing yards allowed. I think that's going to give them a chance to at least compete. Whether or not they'll win it, again, I think it's going to be more of a coin flip this year than several years past.
Brett, I'm looking at the college games, and it's not as good as last week, but it's, they're not going to all be that good, but there are some good games out there. And one of the ones that intrigues me, it really does, it's the Army Black Knights going into South Bend to take on the Fighting Irish. And that defense, the way it's tough to score on Army, and Notre Dame struggles sometimes to move the ball. Low-scoring game, one-possession game. Is it wrong of me I kind of give an Army a little bit of a chance, or do they not have the athletes to match up with them?
Well, I think it's a fun, intriguing matchup, Matt. Now, Army had a bye week. They only scored 14 points 2 weeks ago against North Texas, and they had really been blowing teams out. I don't know if North Texas is a heavier weight class than some of their other conference opponents. It's at Yankee Stadium. It's in the Bronx. It's a little bit of a unique situation. But for Notre Dame, they have to win. If they lose this week to Army or to USC next week, that'll just open up one more spot for the Big Ten or SEC in the playoffs, or maybe a second ACC team. I think they can keep it competitive. I'm intrigued by it. I still think Notre Dame's playing good enough to be able to handle both this week with Army and next week. But, because you're right, Matt, there's not as many good games this week than previous weeks. I'll give it more attention. I'll watch the Penn State-Minnesota game, the Fraud Bowl, if you will, and there's a couple others kind of intriguing, maybe even a Kansas and Colorado. But we don't have the volume that we've had in these last couple of weeks of these epic matchups.
Who's the SEC team that has the worst possibility, you think, of making it in under a 4-team entry out of the SEC? Because I'm with you. I think if Notre Dame is out, that opens the door for a 5th SEC team. So who is that 5th team right now? Is it Tennessee? Is it A&M? Is it Ole Miss potential? Those are probably the 3 teams you'd be looking at, and it's because of who they've lost to.
No, I would agree with all 3, and that's where, Hunter Yurachek and his committee have a lot of work to do, because I think you spend more time analyzing the losses than ever before, because, A, there's more of them, and there's more teams with more losses, and it really does become crazy. Scott Van Pelt did this funny thing last night on SportsCenter, and he said, you've got a no-loss Indiana team, and you've got a 2-loss SEC team, but the 2 losses are to top 10 teams, and Indiana hasn't played a top 10 team. So how do you balance that nonsense out? And you play that game, well, you beat so-and-so, but you only won by so many points, but you didn't play this team, and I find it confusing, and I find it entertaining, much more so than I thought. But I think those are the 3 teams. And I do think maybe now more than ever, Phil, now is when style points matter. I mean, we've all played the game. Your schedule isn't as tough as my team, and you haven't played this. But this is where you better play good football. And I think that's what makes this Ohio State-Indiana game a little bit fascinating, too, because I don't know how good Indiana is, but it's hard to tell Ohio State, hey, you got to go in there and win by 21 points. It's hard to win in November, let alone thinking we've got to win by 3 scores to eliminate a team or really kind of flash. But it wouldn't surprise me if there weren't teams, and Lane Kiffin's name comes to mind, where if you have a chance to put the hammer down and put 40 or 50 on somebody, you're going to do it.
Brett, I'm looking at some of the games you've been to. You've seen Drew Aller at Penn State. You've seen Quinn Ewers at Texas, Cam Ward at Miami, just to name a few. But you've seen a lot of players. The kid at LSU, I like. When you start talking about the quarterbacks, who has been the top quarterback you've seen play so far this year?
You know, Matt, I kind of put it in the same category as I do with teams. I think there are guys with a lot of tools that haven't been perfect. Cam Ward is exciting to me. I think he's got some aspects of his game, kind of a nonchalant that's different and interesting and not to a good side. And Quinn Ewers needs to be better on deep balls down the field. He has the ability to get rid of the football quickly and make some good reads. He has just missed time and time again on some 10, 15-yard balls downfield. Carson Beck's been a huge disappointment this year. You talk about a guy who has all the physical tools. Nick Saban was talking about Nussmeier coming into this year, how good he thought he would be, and hasn't quite been to that point. Other schools have made quarterback changes. So I don't know if we have the absolute elite. If you put me on the spot, I would probably say Cam Ward, because he has good receivers and he gets them involved. He gets them to 15, 20-yard pass plays. It comes with a few extra aspects of taking some sacks and maybe making the occasional throw that'll leave you shaking your head. But I do think the upside of him is pretty good.
Brett, when you watch Arkansas and you've seen them twice up close in games that you've called, and I know you keep up on everything that's happening there. You know, in the losses, the major difference is turnovers. Do you feel that it is strictly about turnovers with this team? You know, take away the two turnovers against Texas, maybe we're talking about a different situation. You know, maybe the Ole Miss game's a little bit different just because their offense was so explosive that day. You know, the LSU game, I feel the turnover in the end zone made the difference. That was the thing that really swung the game from competitive to no longer being competitive. Is that the main separator right now for Arkansas and other teams? And what do you think is what's that a symptom of specifically?
Well, I think it's the aspect we point to, and it makes the most sense. But I do think you have to go a few layers below that. And I'll give you an example. 2 weeks ago, we had Florida, Texas. And I had Florida beating LSU last week, and they did. And they are on their third-string cornerback, and they've lost their running backs and the wide receivers. If they were healthy, that could be a 7-8 win team. But last week against Texas, they missed a field goal. They had a penalty that took them out of field goal range. They had a chance to get a touchdown and didn't do it. And sometimes I think it's those 4 or 5 impactful plays that good teams make and so-so or average teams don't always make. And I think that's the difference. And it doesn't – sometimes that's turnover. Sometimes it's just taking a mistake. And I'll give you an example. The overtime game at Oklahoma State, Taylon Green took a sack he shouldn't take. He had a wheel route for a touchdown in overtime, and he missed it. You and I could have hit that ball that game. So sometimes it's those 2 or 3 plays that you don't make that other teams do that separate 5 and 6 win teams from 8 and 9 win teams. And I think when we watched Florida last week, Gino at one point said to me, that's what 5-win teams or 6-win teams do. They take points off the board. They make a mistake at the wrong time. It's easy to focus on turnovers, but sometimes it's just hard to get out of the way. And we've heard everybody say this from time to time. In order to start winning games, sometimes you have to stop beating yourself. And turnovers is a big part of that. But sometimes it's the other 4 or 5 impactful plays that can change a game that if you don't make, you're probably not going to win.
Yeah, and Matt, I wonder, we look at the idea of turnovers and think, well, why are these things happening? Arkansas has fumbled the ball. This is just not recovered by the other team, but fumbled the ball 23 times. That is tied with Oklahoma for the most in Division I football. So for me, it's not just unluckiness. It's not just the opposing defensive players that are, coming in and swatting the ball out. Is it a matter of practicing the fundamentals? Is it a matter offensive line has got to be an issue with this as well? To me, it's not just, we got to take care of the turnovers. There's something about the way that they're carrying the ball or maybe, the free runs on Talon sometimes, that is the reason why some of this seems to happen so often.
Well, Matt would know this probably better than anybody else. You go back and look at the turnovers. A lot of those have stories, and maybe not the C.J. Brown fumble last week, but Talon Green fumbling in the end zone against Ole Miss. Well, he's standing 9 yards deep. There's pressure. Maybe it wasn't the greatest play call considering pressure that would impact it. Oftentimes interceptions are because quarterbacks are running for their life. They aren't throwing on the run well. They're making mistakes. Teams are anticipating their play calls. So there always seems to be a handful of stories. But when you're turning the ball over with regularity, there are other aspects, I would agree, Phil, than just not good ball security or not good decision-making.
All right, last thing, easy MVP choice today, right? It's got to be Shohei. And maybe you can make a case for Bobby Witt Jr., but, I mean, come on. If Aaron Judge is a finalist for MVP, he's probably going to win it. That would be my thought.
Well, we get two of them, right? We get one in each league.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying it'll be Ohtani in one and Judge in the other, but I thought maybe Bobby Witt Jr., you could make a case for him.
No, I think you could make a great case for him. I think he might have the best season of anybody finishing second in a long time, whether it's runs, whether it's hits, whether it's batting average, whether it's Gold Gloves. I mean, the kid literally does everything in a pitcher's park, in a cold weather park, and I think he's really deserving of consideration, but I do think Judge will probably get it, whether it's the home runs and the RBIs or whether it's playing for a team that went to the World Series. But Bobby Witt had a year that, I mean, if he has that same year going forward, Phil, and he has that same comparable year 3 or 4 of the next 5 seasons, he's going to win multiple MVPs.
You on the call? You on the call for women's hoops tonight? Oral Roberts, I'll be there. You?
I will be there watching you do your thing because the network has picked it up, SEC Network. So I do get a day off, and of course the network has the men's game Friday night with Little Rock. So they're cutting into my workload a little bit, but it's giving me a time to focus on a few other things. So I'll be watching you.
All right. Well, listening, I guess, because watching me do it is not really all that interesting. Appreciate you, Brett. Thanks for your time.
All right, guys.
Thanks, Brett.
Brett Dolan with us each. It is Thursday, right? Yes, it is still Thursday today on ESPN Arkansas and hitthatline.com.
BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA, and college basketball, NHL to UFC and MMA. Head to BetOnline today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here.